Welcome to the Boone Podcast. I'm your host, Bret Boone. And today on the program, I sit down with a six-time All-Star, as a three-time World Series champion. In 1988, he was a second-round pick with the Boston Red Sox. And the scout that signed him was none other than my grandpa, Ray Boone. Ladies and gentlemen, Curt Schilling. Shill, thanks for coming on the program.
What's going on, Booney? How you doing? I'm glad you made that connection early, because that was one of the highlights of my career was becoming kind of a de facto member of the Boone family, which your grandfather made me. What a wonderful man he was.
I love it too. And when I was getting ready for this podcast, it as we all get older, as I get older, I was very close with my grandpa. So anything when I have a show to do or anything's we're gonna get some Ray Boone action. I love it because
Yeah,
when we had him, you take it for granted. We were both playing at the time, and Gramp, he'd follow me
right,
around, and I'd come to San Diego, and of course, Gramps would be waiting there, and
right.
tell me that Bob Feller story for the 50th time, and I'd say Gramps, and then you he's gone for a while, and you wish you could hear that story again.
He's such a good man, and I would imagine a lot of your life is like that, given your like 10th generation Major League Baseball players, with your father and your brother, and he was, but it was I'll tell you real quick. So he drafted and signed me, and we were in the JUCO World Series in Colorado, and we got eliminated late in the series. And I went back to the hotel, and your grandfather was there, and he's like, let's sit down and talk. And I was like, okay. And so I thought, I'm gonna hold out, and I'm gonna, I was drafted, by the way, in the January draft, the last January draft
Right, the
ever.
last one.
And so I said, I'm gonna hold out for like a lot of money or what. I don't even remember what I was thinking, but he said, here's what we're gonna offer you, and it's I think it was 25 grand. And I was like, well, I really think I'm worth a lot more. And it's like, well, then let's do this. You go ahead and go back to JUCO, and if we get a chance to draft you again sometime in the future, maybe we'll do that. And I was like, oh, no, I'll sign. I'm good. I don't. That was his full negotiating tactic. Was okay. See ya. And I signed like 5 minutes later.
That's awesome because I often wondered what is Ray Boone like in the living room, because I got him in my living room, and I used to get, oh, Gramps, you're scouting,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
how tough could it be, Gramps? And he'd always, but believe me, when I was a kid, because you were a little before me, I came out
yeah.
of the draft in '90, but I've spent, like I said, I spent so much time when I was in college. Gramps would be up at USC all the time watching me,
Yep.
and he'd always be talking about his guys. Hey, I
Well,
got
that was
this.
in his region, right? Were you in his region, or was he just Arizona?
He was Arizona, right?
Okay.
So he'd come up, but he'd come up to my weekend series, and I remember when he drafted, he said, "I got this Schilling kid, think he's going to be good," and it was stories like that my whole life that are so
Yeah.
cool, behind the scenes stuff, and
Well, I think he was in every good sense of the word. He was old school in the sense that you're one of the things I think that a lot of the older scouts wanted, I think, has been lost in this day and age. They wanted guys that wanted to play professional baseball. Like that was an asset. That was a trait for them. I don't know if knew Kevin McReynolds at all, but Kevin McReynolds was a guy, and I'm sure you play with guys like this,
yeah,
guys
Max,
who were supremely talented, but baseball was like, whatever. It's I'll go play today, but I really can't wait to go fishing.
right?
Like they wanted guys who were baseball rats, who wanted to be at the park, and I think your grandfather was very much in that camp.
Yeah, he was. I mean, that was important to him in scouting, because today the scouting is different. We're
Yeah,
measured,
yeah,
and there's a lot more data to it. Some good,
yeah.
some I don't attribute a lot of success to.
Right, right, right,
But
right.
in his day, it was that eye. It was.
Yeah.
I've seen
Well,
this 1,000 times before, Brett, and this is what I see. This usually translates into a big leaguer.
I got to tell you, one of the coolest things that ever happened to me when I got traded to the Red Sox in 2003 in the winter. One of the sales pitches from Theo and them, they had sent a letter that Bill James had written to me as a Diamondback about pitching in Fenway, but they also brought with them all of the old scouting reports from the Red Sox, and it had all your grandfather's initial scouting reports when I was in junior college, up till I got drafted, and his projections of me. And reading those words is, and I can hear it in his voice too. I thought was just one of the more fascinating things I had ever had a chance. I still have them. They're treasured things that I have and I'll always have. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I know Gramps, he was proud of you and what you did because, well, you know why? Because I had to hear about it all the
Well,
time.
and that's
And I
the
said,
thing though,
Gramps, I got to face him this weekend.
right? You know
Leave
what?
it be.
You know what was great about that, Brett? Though is we stayed friends till he passed.
Yeah, I
We
remember.
didn't talk a lot, but we when we ran into each other, it was always old friends, and I always treasured that and valued that. And then obviously getting to know your family, your older brother, who is one of my favorite people in the world, your dad, who I grew up a Pirate fan, so I really didn't like your dad, but your dad ended up being he's such a phenomenal guy. And a nice guy and a soft spoken guy, and being around Philly a lot, I run into and listen to people talk about your father too.
Um, yeah, and I always thought this. I don't know if I've ever had a chance to stay. I know you showed up at Gramps. I think it was a celebration of life, 2004, and I remember that because that was a tough day for me, and I had to kind of give the eulogy because my dad couldn't get through it.
Right.
But I remember you showing up, and I just thought, wow, that's big time right there. So I do remember that, and and like you said, you had that relationship with Grandpa, and that proved to me right there, like, well, this my grandpa that means so much to me, he means a lot to Curt Schilling too.
Well,
I thought that was
because
a pretty classy move.
I think part of it, and I appreciate that, but I think part of that was because we were raised by men like that. We were raised to value the things that made men men. There was no toxic masculinity or any of the other crap that goes on today. It was, you're a man, you have responsibility, you have accountability, you have a job to do, and men like that really. I lost my father in 1988, and I was looking for very strong male figures throughout my career, and he was one of them. And Frank Robinson was another. But men who said who made you know. And your dad was just your grandfather, well, your dad too, and was just one of those guys who the Red Sox were old school in the sense that they didn't. I didn't have a pitching coach when I was in Boston until I got to like AAA or double A. We had roving instructors, and it was really, when I look back on it, it's like insane. But they were very old school in the sense that they just threw all the ducks in the pond, and the ones that swam, they figured, well, they'll make it to the big leagues, and the ones that drown, they won't. And they let us kind of go to ourselves. And you could argue that not a great approach, but those old school guys knew that baseball players would eventually figure it out.
Yeah, I talk about that. I don't dismiss things, but I tell young players today, especially, let's even go younger, the younger, before professional baseball. And people always, and I'm sure you get asked a lot, the advice you give. And I tell parents and kids all the time, those, we're going to hire this guru coach that's really going to
Right.
help little Johnny be a better player. And I said, that's all well and great. Once you get to a certain level where you have a certain amount of ability where you can play at the next level. And I said, that's all great. The special lessons, this and then that. But you know where we learn? We learn by trial and error. We learn
Yeah.
by failing. We learn as a hitter, I learned by going into that cage day after day and tweaking my hands and my feet and my position. And, oh, I think I got something. Now I take it into the game. Well,
Right.
that doesn't work. Back to the drawing board.
Well,
That's where
and
we learn.
right, Brett. But I think one of the most important points of that unspoken is you took that to the cage on your own. It wasn't on the schedule. It wasn't on the docket. You weren't at a team practice. And that's, to me, all these parents with travel ball, which I think might be one of the biggest scams in history, and drive line and all these other things. I try to tell people, I don't care how much money you spend. If your kid has the talent to get to the big leagues, baseball will find him.
Hmm.
And there, I rarely, and I don't believe there have been more than a handful of people in history who've gone under the radar, because people mistake things by saying, oh, it's a game. You threw a ball for a living. You played a game for. It's a 10 or $11 billion a year business. It's not a game. And guys in the big leagues enjoy it as a game, but they don't treat it as a game. You can't. I was consumed by it. I lived. I can remember, in the minor leagues, being in a Motel 6 in the window of the closet working on my delivery, like trying to stand at my balance point, or
Yeah.
just the stupid stuff that we did, all of it not on our own. And I always tell parents, and I talk to a lot of the younger parents, and one of the pieces of advice I give, I have a 10-year-old whose dad says, hey, when do I start him with the curveball? And I said, well, when his hand's big enough to manipulate the baseball. So about 16 years from now, fastball change up until then.
Right.
And they're like, well, I'm going to get him so-and-so. I said, listen, if you can't step away and have your kid continue to love the game, the only thing you're doing is raising a former ball player who just hasn't quit yet. Because the minute you're out of the room, they're done.
It's a good point.
And so, what should I do for my kid? Just make sure they love the game. Play it as much as you can and make sure they love the game. Don't start worrying about the dumb stuff like, my 11-year-old's not getting his front foot down and he's hitting. You know what? Stop with that crap. He's
Right.
11. Let him just play, because if you have athletic IQ, you figure it out on your own. You're the guy that goes in the cage and you realize that you're rolling over a little bit on the tee. So you move yourself on the tee or you adjust your hands because it doesn't feel right. And you coach yourself. And that ultimately, Booney, as well as I do, I think one of the keys to being a big league player is understanding your skill set and knowing what you can and can't do and staying within the confines of those expectations, working on your weaknesses 10 times more than you work on your strengths, because you want to be a complete ball player. You don't want to be the all offensive, no defender guy, right? I mean, I can't imagine growing up in the Boone family, because your dad was a two-way player in a sense. He could hit as a catcher, but he was a phenomenal catcher. Your brother the same way, and you were very much the same way in that you guys were elite defensively, but you brought batting skills to the table at a time when it was all about RBIs and home runs. And I
Y-
thought that was always a cool thing.
when you mentioned, like you just as an example, and this, you mentioned a Kevin McReynolds type player. I played with a few of those guys, and now that
Yep.
you talk about it, it's amazing to me because I love this game so much. You talk about standing in front of the mirror, getting your balance point.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't tell you how many nights I had my cowboy boots on, naked in the just so I could make light of myself a little bit that I was
Yep.
doing it, but I still had to do it. It's like something's off. Man, at the release point, I'm not picking up
Yep.
that
Yep.
slider. I'm reading fastball out of his hand, and he's fooling me on the slider every time.
I used to, hey, when we played in the minor leagues, we played at the worst. We stayed at the worst hotels ever. They were nasty. The only thing I ever cared about was if they had a pool, because I'd go out into the. That was how I dry pitched in the pool in like the middle of the shallow deep end, where I could get to my shoulders below the water, and I would slowly do my delivery and pick it up so I could stay back, so I could feel literally every
Right.
millimeter of my delivery. But it was in the hotel pool at a Motel 6 in Elmira, New York, or Greensboro, North Carolina. But I didn't have to be coached to do that. I felt like that's what I had to be doing. And those Kevin McReynolds guys, and again, supremely talented. I always looked at Will Myers like that. I don't know him, but he
Right.
seemed to me like a guy who showed up at the ballpark and he's like, yeah, I got 4 at bats tonight. I went 3 for 4. I can't wait to go fishing. And it was like, that I was always that. I was the other way. Like I went 3 for 4. Okay, how did he get me out that 4th at bat? Or I punched a guy out 3 times. How did he get that the bat on the ball that fourth time. And I was always searching. And that's what I found, honestly, to the end of my career. I was always searching for perfection. And I was okay coming up a little short, but that didn't stop me from looking.
Yeah, I don't know how those guys at the level we played at for so long. I don't know how the guys that don't have that level of passion for this game, how they competed.
Well,
Because I think how much I love this game. Yeah,
yeah.
we all got a certain amount of talent we're all born with. But I love this game, and I was so passionate about this game till the end. It's like, wow, I put every ounce of heart and soul I had into it, and I thought, how
Well,
how do other guys that don't have this, how do they even compete?
I'll give you a great example. Scott Rowland, who was one of my favorite teammates of all time, and most athletically gifted human being I've ever been around. Scott Rowland wanted to show up at 7:05, take his 4 at bats, play Hall of Fame defense better than anybody's ever lived, and go home at 10 o'clock. He didn't want any of the superfluous stuff. He didn't want the Philadelphia media. He didn't want to hang out and have beers in the clubhouse. He wanted, Scott Rowland was the guy who showed up at the park and he had, when Atlas shrugged, he was reading, like, and people were looking at him like he had 5 eyes. And a lot of guys like Larry Boa, lifers, baseball lifers, that rubbed the wrong way because they didn't understand, how can you not be all in? Well, he was all in. It was just the 7:05 to 10:05 all in, and then he wanted to go home and be left alone. A lot of coaches and a lot of people tried to make guys like that into something they were not. Scott Rowland was a leader, like Cal Ripken was the same way. Cal didn't talk a lot. He showed up. He played every day. He took his 100 ground balls. He played the game the right way. He played the game as hard as anybody on the field. And then he went home. And that's what they wanted. And baseball, there was, in a good clubhouse, you had the full gamut. You had the vocal leader who, it didn't matter what he was hitting, he was the leader. And then you had the 25th guy. And great teams had all 25.
Yeah. No, without a doubt. And some of the best guys, especially when I was a young player, some of the guys I looked to was not necessarily what they said, but how they went about their business, how they carried themselves, how they took the field, how they played the game, how they acted like a pro. The
Right.
the pros, when they were going through tough times, and I'd be keying in on these guys. I'm like, wow, what he's going through right now and the way he's behaving, that's a professional right there. That's
You
who
know,
I strive to be like. Because when I
and
was young, I was,
I wanted
woo,
to ask you this. When you were young, you grew up in a big league clubhouse.
yep,
And I wondered, how much of a positive or negative impact was that on you going in? Because I can see where in the minor leagues it can hurt guys if you're not reverent of the play. Like everybody else is coming in, they're wide eyed and bushy
right,
tailed, and
right.
this is
I got you.
professional. And you've been hanging out, dude, with Ken Griffey Jr. It's like, easy, relax, guys. I mean, how did that impact you in the minor leagues coming up, and then eventually when you got to your big leagues in the rookie year?
Well, I go, okay, so yeah, my childhood was Philly in the 70s, pretty much. So it was Schmitty and Boa and Bull
Yep,
and Carlton and
Vuk.
Manny Trio. Was on that team. Bake McBride, Maddox. That was my guys growing up.
Yep,
So yeah, you're right. I was a 10-year-old kid, a 8-year-old kid, throughout the whole decade of the 70s, that I went to the ballpark, and it was no big deal. And I'm staying at Pete Rose's house tonight
right,
because that's what every kid does
right,
at 8.
right.
And that's how I was brought up. It wasn't a matter of I was this brat, but I know no different. And it's
You
like I
weren't
just
in.
go,
You weren't. There wasn't that awe of, oh my
correct.
God, I'm in a clubhouse. And real quick, my kid. I can remember. I didn't realize raising kids in the sport. I can remember my oldest son comes home. My oldest son Garrett comes home from elementary school one day, and the teacher tells the story about how he went into class, and when they had talk about your parents' day, first thing my son asked was what everybody's father's number was. Because
Yeah.
he just assumed that, well, of course everybody plays baseball, so
Everybody plays right. Everybody
yeah.
plays at these everybody's home is
Yep.
is Veteran Stadium.
But such a different perspective for you. Like I said,
I went to the minor leagues, Kurt, and it was this is where it got me for the first time.
yeah,
I go to Peninsula, Virginia of the what the heck's the name of that league? Anyway,
yeah, Appalachian League or something.
No, it's not the Appalachian. It's the
There's some
oh,
redneck out back.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I pull up Peninsula, Virginia. I come from USC. I go into this trailer, and that's our clubhouse.
Yep.
And I walk in. I'm kind of like, whoa, all right, this is a little shady, but this is what A ball is. Let's go.
Yep.
So I remember the first night. I remember I get there and all the players, and it was an older A ball team. I had 26, 27-year-old guy. I remember I was facing Arthur Rhodes was my debut.
Oh my
And they're
God.
like, this guy, he was an Oriole at the time. And he said, this guy throws really hard. Bret, you probably picked a bad day to make your debut. So I was thinking about that. And I got through the game. We come back to the clubhouse, and I remember sitting in my locker. And right away, I didn't even think twice about it. I'm like, well, where's the spread?
Yeah.
So, I'm sitting there and I'm waiting. I'm looking at everybody. I'm like, well, we got to have some food. They got to feed us after the game. So I kind of walk over to the guy, and his name, I'll never forget him. His name was Tiny, they called him. This guy probably weighed 400 pounds.
Yep.
And he clipped the tickets, he worked the barbecue, and he dragged the field. And, he was in charge of
Yep.
the turf. He was everybody, and they called him Tiny, obviously, because he was 400 pounds. So I go to Tiny, and I say, hey, where's the spread? And he looks at me, he goes, hey, Junior. He goes, I'll be right in. So I turn around and I think to myself, I'm telling my teammates, I said, Tiny's bringing the spread. And they're laughing at me. He comes in with a basket full of hot dogs,
Yep.
throws them on a cardboard table in the middle of the trailer and goes, there's your spread, big leaguer.
Yep.
And that kind of, I realized, I started laughing at myself,
Yep.
actually had a hot dog, moved on. And I said, what do we do? Well, if you want to have spreads like this, don't play very good. If you want to get
Yep.
the hell out of here, play better.
You want
And
to go to that
that was my
USC
journey.
spread, you get to the big leagues as fast as you can. And but that was a thing, right? I mean, in the minor leagues when we were coming up, you ate concession stand food,
Right.
or this team stopped at somewhere on the way back to your home park, and it became. I'll tell you, it was another separator too. If you think about it, you think about the evolution of baseball. Now you have chefs in the clubhouse. You have private chefs. You
Yep.
have, there was nobody that wanted to revolt more than I did when Boston took all the ice cream out of the clubhouse and brought in a sushi chef. And I was like, wait, what? No, that ain't happening. I want an ice cream sandwich. I don't want raw fish. But that became a thing, right? In the minor leagues now, it's they teach guys how to eat and all the things that go with it. But that's the evolution of the game. And I think there's a lot of things that have happened since we played that I don't think are good for the game or not conducive to better baseball. But that's not one of them. I think the progression in the minor leagues and then in the clubhouse and all the off the field stuff, I think that's been a tremendous positive for young players.
I do too. And I think here's the one thing I think about though, because I was a big, I'm into that nutrition and I think it's better and I mean, what it does to you mentally.
Yep.
But but I think it's great what they're doing in the minor leagues. I think the facilities they have right now, they have trainers at their
Yep.
disposal. You've got the best of the best to be the best. They're making it as easy as they can for you to be the best player you can be.
And
I think
that's
that's
also,
great.
I think that's a downside too, right? Because a lot of the things, you were a nutrition guy, you had to work to take care of yourself in the minor leagues. You couldn't walk down from the hotel and go to the vending machine and grab chips. You were that guy who was searching out healthy calories because you realized tomorrow I have to play again. And tomorrow I have to play again. And when you go to that first 100 some game schedule in the minor leagues and you're playing every day, there's a realization at some point that, and I always heard Deion Sanders and Brian Jordan talk about this, that playing in Major League Baseball was far harder than playing in the NFL because the schedule on Sunday, if I was banged up, it didn't matter. I had Schmaltz on Monday. I didn't have a
Right.
week off. And the minor leagues, I think, was the first place where position players realized, holy crap, like I'm tired. It's July and half the schedule's still left. And you learned the hard way, or you went off and you were selling insurance in a couple months.
And I've got a son now in the minor leagues, and he's very because probably he's my son. He's learned the game from me. Not that I beat it into his head, but he knows the type of to type of player I was, type of guy, how I went about my business. So I think all these strides they're making uh, are great. They're making more money now. They're playing in nicer fields. They've got nicer facilities. But the way they went about it kind of rubbed me wrong.
Yeah.
And my son's name is Jacob, and I'd hear minor league guys, well, they need to treat us better.
Yeah. Yeah.
They. And I sat there and I thought
I'm
to
with you.
myself, here's the deal. Here's where you're
Yeah.
wrong. You don't add 1 cent to the bottom line. You probably got a big bonus and you got an opportunity to be a big leaguer. And if you're a big leaguer, believe me, your dreams are going to be fulfilled 100-fold as far as from
Yep.
a monetary standpoint. When you're in the minor leagues, you have a right to nothing. We made nothing. Whatever they give you is a positive to get you to the big leagues, but to sit there and have this moral authority of, oh, we need to be treated better.
I
We need
agree.
this and
Couldn't
that.
agree
I'm
more.
sitting there thinking, what are you talking about? You
Well,
owe nothing. You don't put
but
anything towards this bottom line. Zero.
right. But think about to me what's lost is the athlete loses in the end because that hunger that we had,
Hunger.
dude.
That's it.
I was making $750 a month in
Yep.
A ball, rookie ball before taxes, with $11 a day per diem. And I remember my first call up to the big leagues, my first big league sprint. I was like, "What the hell is this?" And I had Eddie Murray and Cal Ripken in the locker room, and when I went back to AAA, it was everything I could do to be consumed about getting back there. Like
Yeah.
and because I mean, you go AAA is usually the first level anybody flies, and you do it commercial,
Right.
and then you hop on that first private charter, and you're like, okay, I haven't touched my bag, and I'm already in my hotel room. What the hell's going on?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my god, and that to me was always a huge piece of the incentive to not go back to AAA. And now, guys, now you can retire. I never thought I'd say this. You can retire and never work another day in your life and not sniff a day in the big leagues now.
Yeah. And and the big league club isn't making a nickel
Nope.
because of it. And I think your point is well taken about us in the minor league. It's something you have to go through because I I don't know what I made in A ball in 1990, but I know it wasn't a lot. But I knew
Yep.
I went to my buddies. We didn't have people that gave their houses out. We had to go rent a house like everybody else. I got in
Yep.
with like four guys. They said, Brett, it was the middle. It was the June draft though, so I only had my A ball
Right.
was only half season. I said I need a place to stay. They said if you want to sleep on the couch, you give us $80 for the month, and you're on the
Yep.
couch. I said, got it. I didn't
Dude.
have money. I went to the
Yep.
Piccadilly, and I was happy as you could possibly be because all I
I
want to do is go to the ballpark to get to Double A.
Yes, I lived in an attic in Elmira, New York for $99 a month, and my landlord was this 94-year-old black woman who was the nicest lady in the world, and there was three of us living in the house. And I always do this because this was the roof in my bedroom. I was in the attic. When I say in the attic, I was at the peak of the house. I'm 6'5", and I'm in a room that's 6 feet tall with a bed, and I remember all of it as being like the greatest experience ever. I
It's the
had fun.
best.
It was such a blast.
Yeah, and it makes you appreciate what you have,
Yeah.
and later in my how we'll always do the uh you'll go to your A ball or your double A affiliate and do a game for the fans, and they'll pack the house, and it'll be a big money producer for that
Yep.
affiliate. And man, I'd go back to that A ball. Like we'd go to our California League affiliate when I was with the Mariners the day before the opening day. And we'd be playing in, Bakersfield or wherever. And all right, Booney, you got to get in at bat. Then we're going to get you out of there. We're going to fly to Seattle. But
Yeah.
I remember going to those games and going, how did we ever do it
Yeah.
with these lights? I can't see anything. The backdrops, your hand is above the
Yep.
backdrop. I can't see. I'm going to get hurt here. But
Yep.
when we were in A ball and we were making $700, we didn't care. It's like just play. It was the game. It was in its purest
Yep. You
form.
got to get you had something to do every day. And thank God, because if you didn't, if I didn't have baseball every day, I would have never made the big leagues because I was an idiot when I went to rookie ball. I did some of the dumbest shit you could ever do, but I had really strong male mentors. My first two Italian coaches were small Italian guys in the Red Sox organization, and my God, they were mean as hell. But I needed that, and everybody needs that. And I got to tell you, Boone, one of the things that I talk about, I talk to young players, pre-college players, and advice for the draft and stuff. And I say, if you're drafted and you've never spent a year away from home, don't sign. The amount of things that happen that first year in pro ball off the field are enough to end every career ever, from the girls to the bars to all of the things in that. I mean, I was in Elmira, New York. Elmira, New York had a small gaggle of girls who were looking to marry their way out. Elmira, New York had bars that, hey, come on in, buddy, because if you come in and people know the local baseball teams in here, I don't care that you can't drink, you're not of age. All of the things you had access to were to me, they were new to me. They were shock to me. And if I hadn't spent a year away from home, I never would have made the big leagues. No chance.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. All right, Curt Schilling, the name. It's been polarizing.
Hmm.
Uh, why do you think people consider Curt Schilling controversial? I gotta ask
Um,
the question.
well, mainly because I'm a conservative. That's the number one reason. I have very conservative, have always had conservative values. Number two is because I talk a lot. I'm not someone, I've never been, the same reason the media hates me today was the reason they were in love with me when I played, because I was a quote machine. I was a soundbite. And it wasn't because I wanted to hear my own voice. It was because I had a lot of passion for the things you were asking me about. I didn't have yes, no answers to any of the questions the media was asking me. I would talk about, because I thought about this game 24/7 every day of my life. You're going to ask me about uh, X, Y, and Z. I'm going to answer, and I was the opposite. My father was like you're the male men in your life. My father was a quiet man of few words, but when he spoke, words were heavy. I always came from the school, why use 5 words when I can use 20? And so I was a talker. And that's the reason they love me when I played and they hate me when I retired. Because as a talker, you got to call them. You got to call them inches to Phil. Just go ask me a question. I'll answer it. And I always looked at that responsibility as part of the job. I failed every oral report every game in high school because I hated standing up in front of people talking. I recognized it as a part of my job in baseball, and uh, it was something I was known for. I was always a great teammate. I gave everything I had. I was a mentor to the younger players that needed to be mentored. I never did anything, and it's hard for a pitcher to do anything to be detrimental to the team anyway, because as a pitcher, in a selfish sense, if I do well, we win. And so those things carried over into real life, and in this day and age, I'm a conservative male who is not even remotely afraid of voicing my opinion. And you think about it, Booney. I tell people I was probably the kickoff of the cancel culture, because I got fired from ESPN for comparing terrorists to Nazis, and for saying that men should have a use the men's room. Things that I don't know if anybody in our lifetimes had ever refuted or argued about. But in this day and age, corporations and business America, power and money drive everything. And I'm okay with talking trash to people who I think are morally inept and bankrupt. And that doesn't sit well with the left. I'm controversial. I spent 10 years on the Hall of Fame ballot, and I laugh because I tell people my vote total changed every year, but I didn't strike anybody out for any of those 10 years. I never got an out. And my vote total went up and down and up and down and up and down. And uh, at the whims of people you can't control, in a group of, you were around long enough to know there are very few Jason Starks and Tim Kirkjians and the truly phenomenal human beings in sports media. There are a lot more really bad people, and they tend to have the loudest voice and the most ink.
The you asked to be removed from the Hall of Fame ballot, and that's an interesting point because I've got a lot of opinions on the Hall of Fame.
Right.
Uh, I disagree with a lot of how they go about it.
Right.
So I want to ask you though. if you had your way, how would there's a current system in place.
Right.
What do you think the best way would be if you had full say of how Hall of Famers are chosen?
Okay. A couple things real quick. I took myself off the ballot in the 10th year because the scenario became a very unhappy one for my family. Every year when the Hall of Fame voting would come up, the media would rehash all the stories that weren't true in the first place, and it was just a pain in the ass, and I didn't want to go through the process, and I that was why I asked to be removed for the final year. But if I was doing it, there are a couple things. First of all, and I'll do this with you. I do it with everybody. I'm going to throw out a name, and
Okay.
you tell me, and you say Hall of Famer. You say yes or no. Yes for Hall of Famer. No. Pedro Martinez,
Yes.
Ken Griffey Jr.,
Yes.
Andy Pettit.
No.
Right. The second you have to pause for me, you're not a Hall of Famer. I wouldn't be in my Hall of Fame. My Hall of Fame would be guys who absolutely or not.
Right.
Because to me, because and no slight, anybody in the Hall of Fame had a phenomenal career and all the things go with that. But Willie Mays is in the same Hall of Fame as Harold Baines. Harold Baines was a great player. Make no mistake about it. I thought he was a generational talent. Is he a Hall of Famer? Well, that's debatable. Well, if it's debatable, then he's not in my Hall of Fame. Now, that's not how the Hall of Fame
Interesting.
works.
Interesting. Interesting.
So and here's the thing that I say to people, I'm okay with that. If I don't ever get a plaque in Cooperstown, I'll still have all my rings, all my World Series trophies. I'll have the respect of the guys I suited up with and suited up against, and I'll have my Roberto Clemente Award. And when 1992, my wife and I, after my first year in the big leagues in Philadelphia, that I had success, we were laying in bed one night talking, and she's like, what do you ultimately want from your baseball career? I said, well, two things. I want to win the Roberto Clemente Award, and I want, when I walk away, I want people that I played with to say, if my life depended on one game and I had to give the ball to somebody, that's the guy I'd give the ball to. I said, those two things I have to earn. The rest of the stuff is kind of at somebody else's whim. That's what I wanted, and it worked, I think.
A lot of things, and you play this game long enough, you realize my dad used to tell me all the time. I'd finish a year, and it's like, man, Dad, you think I'm going to win that first Gold Glove this year? And he'd say, Brett, it's out of your control, man.
Yeah.
All you can do, he said, the first thing you're going to learn in this game is life isn't fair. And then you're going to move on, and certain things aren't out of your control. And I think you summed it up there perfectly. I think that the most important things are the guys you suited up with. When they speak of you, what do they say?
Yep.
The rest of it, you can't control. You can't control if you win the Cy Young. You can put the numbers up, but once the numbers are up, somebody's going to choose who they want to choose. Sometimes you win, sometimes you
Yep.
don't. The only thing that are in stone back in our day, where wins and losses, they were a big thing. You could lead the league
Yeah.
in wins, and nobody can take that away from you.
Right.
You can win a batting title, and nobody can take that
But
away from you.
I
But everything
remember
else is objective.
I remember Terry Francona saying one day, we were talking about different stuff, and he had so many profound things to say, and we were talking about a situation. He was getting mistreated by the ownership in Boston, and these just really bad people. And he said to me, Schill, you're fired the day you're hired. They just don't put that date on your contract. So if you know that going in, make sure the day you're fired, you have no regrets. And as a player, if I could look back, the day you sign your first contract, you're going to retire. You just don't know what day that is. So between those two dates, make sure you walk away leaving it all out there. And I think I tried to do that.
In your day, and we refer to it as a horse. And I played with a few horses. You were a horse. You had 200 plus innings 9 times. Today's
I
game.
well,
Very
here's the
few
thing.
people will go 7 innings.
Right.
Garrett Cole will go 7 innings. Verlander will go 7 innings. Kershaw once in a while will go 7.
Yeah.
And the younger players, and I say this all the time, younger position players, they're brought up differently than we were brought up.
Yeah,
It's
it's not
not
their
their
fault.
fault. It's not
Nope.
their fault. And I'm not making this a negative get off my lawn
No.
stuff.
No.
But I remember as a player, as a position player, because you mentioned it earlier in the show here. You said you know how important you are when you take the mound. You are the most important person to us. It doesn't matter tonight. If I'm hot, if I hit a homer, that's going to help us. But if my starting pitcher goes out there and ain't got it, we're done.
Yeah.
And I knew that, and I refer, and you know how it is in the game. We refer to certain guys as he's a horse,
Yep.
and that's usually a guy that takes the ball every fifth day, rarely gets injured, and logs 200 innings
Yeah.
on a consistent basis.
Well, I mean,
Um,
200 innings was the beginning of August or September.
right?
Like 200 innings was, well, of course I'm going to. And here's the reason why. Johnny Padres, who was the greatest, who was my mentor in the cause of my entire career, he taught me. He asked me one day, "What's your in spring training? What's the most important statistic to you?" And we went back and forth, and I never got it. And he finally said, "It's innings." And I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because as my horse, if you pitch the innings, all the other numbers will be where you want them to be. If you're not good, you can't stay in the game and pitch the innings I need you
Yeah.
to pitch." And so the complete game became my most important statistic because at some point early in my career, I remember learning the difference. And the difference was this: there are guys who showed up to pitch and guys who showed up to win. I was getting paid to win, I wasn't getting paid to pitch. And that's a very different mentality. And for a guy like you on my team, my second baseman, there was Dustin Pedroia. When I was in Boston, it was usually Jay Bell in Arizona, and it was a different bunch of different guys in Philadelphia. My second baseman was my outfield coach. I would sit down before my starts, and I would walk my defensive coach, my second baseman. This is where I need you to move my outfielders. This is where I want you to be for these things. These are, and then I would communicate during the game every now and then to, hey, listen, I'm going to go a little different. Give yourself 2 steps to the right, whatever. And what I got was full buy-in from my position players because I made them understand if you don't do your job, it doesn't matter how much. I don't care if you go 0 for 4 and punch out 4 times. I don't want you to. I just need you to catch everything that gets hit at you. I need you to play defense for me because I'll fix it. I'm not going to give up any runs. I only am if you screw up in that sense. And so what I got was I got buy-in from my position players. They understood that they were as important to me on the day I pitched as anything. And so my day, in my mind, my day's win day. When you play on crappy teams, win day takes on a whole new meaning. When you're on a team that wins 65 games and you're making 35 starts, the stadium's filling up on the day you pitch. Teammates' expectations are different on the day you pitch. And I love that expectation. And I tried to bring my position players into the fold to make, and they played differently behind me. They just did. They played differently behind me. I think they felt differently behind me. And I made sure during the game that they knew how important, I remember Gonzo in Arizona playing left field. I told him to play Tony Gwynn a certain way. He said, well, what if he hits it over my head? I said, if he hits it over your head, that's on me. Because the way I'm pitching him, he shouldn't be able to hit it over your head. Same thing with the defensive move at second. Pedroia would always say, well, what if he hits? I said, if he hits it there, then I made a mistake. That's not on you.
Right.
And I got that buy-in from my position players because it's 162 games in 181 days. In late August, you guys are dragging ass. And I need maximum effort from you guys. And when I can get that buy-in, I get your effort in late August that maybe some other guys don't get.
Well, you know why you got the buy-in, though. If you come to me, Bret Boone, in the middle of my career and have that discussion with me, I'm going to look at you and say, okay, but you got to prove to me that you owe me to buy in.
Yep.
And by prove to me, man, you consistently execute your pitches like you're trying to execute them. Once you can do that, Shill, it's your day, baby.
Right.
You tell me what's our plan today. How are we going to do with X, Y, and Z? All right, I like that. Okay, what do you think about this? Yes, Booney, that's great. And after a while, as teammates, we're going to be on the same page on everybody.
Yep.
But to get that buy-in, you've got to prove to me that you not, and I don't want to say it in a condescending way.
No, that's right, though. That's exactly
right. You need to earn it, but essentially you need to earn it.
Well,
like you got to prove to me when you call for a fastball away, it's fastball away. Now you can miss here and there,
right?
But we're going to go with a slider down and away, and I leave it up and in.
Right.
I can't trust that guy.
Yeah. Well,
so I've got
what it brought was a level of accountability for me.
Right.
right? Listen, this if something screws up, it's my fault.
Right.
It's my fault. And even if it isn't my fault as the pitcher, it's my fault because I'm
Right.
the quarterback on the day I pitch. I need total buy-in from my guys. I want you to straight lay out on that Philadelphia turf in a Sunday day game when it's 166 degrees for a ball up the middle because you don't want to give up a hit behind. I want that buy-in from my guys. And the only way
Right.
to get that is, I always talk about when you mentioned down and away and up and in. I always talk to young pitchers about good misses. I was talking to Aaron Nola and Wheeler when I was in Philadelphia. I was talking about the difference between good miss. I missed good. When I was going down and away, I missed away. When I was going
Right.
in, I missed in because every pitch, every single pitch is a byproduct of the pitch before it or setting up the pitch after it. Don't
Right.
care what the count is, what the at bat is. I'm doing this on your first at bat in the first inning because I know on your third at bat in the seventh inning, I need this first pitch fastball
Yep.
away. I need to be able to get that. And when guys like you playing behind me understood the level of preparation, and like I said, I was always in the video room. I always had my laptop. I always had my notebook on the bench. I was consumed. And guys that played with me knew that. And so I had a level of expectation on the day I pitched. Other guys didn't.
Yep. That's well said. You came up, Red Sox, traded to Baltimore. You played a few years there. You were out of the pen. You went to Houston. I didn't even know that about Curt Schilling. I thought I
Oh,
knew everything about it.
devastated.
Next thing I know, you show up in Philly, and you were the horse for a lot of years. I grew up in Philly. I know what that city's like. I
Oh,
love it
yeah.
to this day. You got to be a Philly fan. You got to be a Flyer fan. You got to be an Eagle fan. You got to be
Yep.
a Sixer fan. And you got to say water, and you got to like cheesesteaks, and you got to like hoagies. But no, on a serious moment,
Yep.
I grew up there. I watched Mike Schmidt get booed out of the stadium, and I watched him when they won the 1980 World Series, and I got to go on that float. Another, this is what everybody gets to do moment for me. I'm on the float with a million people in Philly in the 1980 World Series going, yeah, that's what every kid gets to do.
Right.
But I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. I saw that side of it too, and what an unbelievable sports atmosphere it is. You got a lot of it, man. And I'm going to go through it a little bit with the Red Sox and that Yankee rivalry, but Philly too. How'd you
Yeah.
like Philly? Just take me through your Philly
Home.
days.
Home, man. I mean, I first of all, when I got traded from Baltimore to Houston, I was devastated because I thought I was very naive. Well, real quick, here's how this happened. No, this is no lie. So I had just met my wife a couple months before, and it's January of 1990, and it's 11 a.m. in the morning, and I'm sitting at the table and I'm eating breakfast, and I get a phone call. And it's Roland Heeman, the GM of the Orioles. Now, remember, I've spent a total of 3 months in the big leagues. Eddie Murray, Cal Ripken, this is Mike Devereaux, Steve Finley, Brady Anderson, Craig Worthington, Randy Milligan. We had a very young Bob Malacky, Pete Harnish, a really young, talented team. So Roland Heeman calls me, and my first thought is, wow, what the GM's calling me? And he's like, hey, yeah, hey, kid, this is Roland Heeman. I just wanted you to know that we made a trade with the Astros today. And my first thought was, wow, how cool is it that the GM is calling me to tell me that they made a trade? Like, I must be really like important in this organization now. And he's like, yeah, we felt we needed to get some power into the lineup, so we had to make this trade. And and I was like, and I go, okay, Roland, thanks for calling. Like, he was just calling to let me know before I saw it in ESPN. He's like, oh, no, Kat, needed you to know that we actually traded you in the trade. And I was like, wait, what? What? And then it all hits me, and I was devastated because I thought that I was going to be part of that 90 Orioles team and grow with that organization. Spent a year in Houston for all that's worth. I got to play with Bagwell's rookie year, Biggio. Got to be friends and be teammates with Darryl Kyle, Pete Harn. Anyway, then I went to Philadelphia, and I get traded the last day of spring training in 19. This was like the weirdest bus ride of my life. I get traded. I'm in Houston. I get traded the final day of spring training in 92. And we're in St. Petersburg playing the Cardinals. And I was supposed to pitch the ninth inning. And my pitching coach comes in and goes, hey, you're not throwing today. I'm like, what do you mean? I took the bus ride. Of course I'm throwing. He's like, no, you're not throwing. And I can't tell you why. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't tell me why? He goes, well, don't tell anybody, but I think we might have traded you. I'm like, what? What do you mean? Don't you think you traded me or you didn't trade? Where'd you think you might not have traded me to? And he's like, I think we might have traded you to Philly. So I went and grabbed the Sporting News and I opened up the Philly roster and I'm like looking at who's on the team. And I had to ride back with the team to the clubhouse. And it was weird because I'm riding the Houston Astro team bus and I'm no longer on the team. And I'm sitting behind Ken Caminiti and I'm like, this is just weird, dude. Like I'm going to be facing you in a month. Like this, and we were laughing about it. But I got to Philly. Johnny Padres turned my career around in one bullpen. Went out to the bullpen for about 4 weeks, made my first start on May 10th. And I'm very proud. There are statistics I'm very proud of. I didn't make my first start till May 10th. I led the league in complete games that year. I threw 10 complete games in 26 starts. And I started my movement to becoming a top of the rotation guy on a veteran team that turned around and had one of the greatest years in Philadelphia history in 1993 with almost the same core personnel. Philly was home. It's where our kids were born. It's our first place we bought a home. Those fans to this day have been phenomenal to me and to my family. And I cherish, and I always say this to people. People don't understand this. Every memory I ever had with any sport ever is associated first and foremost with the fans. Because without the fan reaction, the moment is empty. Right? Remember in COVID when these guys were playing in empty stadiums, I might have had issues with that in the sense that I fed off the crowd, home and away. I could make 30,000 people shut up, or I could put 50,000 people on their feet. That's power. And that gave me, that was adrenaline for me. But I fell in love with them and they were good to me. And I spent almost 10 years there. Unfortunately, we didn't win very much. I was just back there for the reunion of the 93 team and it was special and it will always be special. And I spent almost 10 years there, got traded to Arizona, which, it's heresy in Boston because people in Boston will say, which one was more special, 01 or 04? And I was like, well, they're kind of the same. And they're like, no, they can't be the same. There's no way. You broke an 86-year-old Curt, but I grew up in Phoenix. And Phoenix was my home. I went to high school there. So I went home, in a sense, to Arizona. And to this day, it's still the only world championship any sports team in Arizona has ever brought. And I got to spend 2 years pitching behind probably the second or third most dominant pitcher in the history of baseball in RJ. And proud to say we did some things that I don't think anybody ever did before them or has ever done since. Boy, that was fun. And then you had, I've been privy to some of the greatest. Joe Carter in 1993, 9/11 World Series in 01 and all the things that went with that. The 04 postseason with the Red Sox, 86-year-old Curse. I've been blessed to be among some of the greatest postseason moments in history. And, 9/11 and 01 was certainly one of those. I love that I, when the postseason started, I knew I was starting game 1 and game 5 of the St. Louis series. I knew that I was going to jump into the Atlanta series, but I knew when the World Series started, I was going to start 1, 4, and 7 if we went 7. And I mean, that's what I live for. I live for October. And had a phenomenal experience in Arizona. Then I went to Boston, and I really, honestly, it was a last minute thing. Arizona and Boston were kind of out of the nowhere of things. The Boston thing, I thought I was going to be a Yankee. My wife wanted to go to New York, and I had heard Boston was 25 guys, 25 cabs, and all this other stuff. And then they had a lot of forethought. And then real quickly, this is how it happened. I was having a fundraiser at my house for skin cancer. My wife is a skin cancer survivor, and we had the ownership of Jerry Colangelo and Joe Garagiola Jr. Our GM were at the house, and I had a total no trade. I negotiated my last 10 years of my own contracts. I always negotiated my own deals. I had a total no trade, and it was just after 03, and we got hurt at the end of the year, and all the things that went with that, and they wanted to move they just signed Gonzo to a long-term extension, and they wanted to pair payroll. And I knew I was kind of the guy. So I gave them a list of teams and nothing really happened. And right about then, Terry Francona interviewed for the Boston job. And I knew Tito from Philly, and I went to them and I told Joe Garagiola, I said, hey, listen, if Boston's interested, I'd be open to listening. He literally walks from me across my backyard to Jerry Colangelo, comes back 5 minutes later and says, hey, just so you know, Boston's actually already made a trade for you on the condition maybe you'd waive your no trade. They'll be here Thursday morning. They have 72 hours to sign you. I'm like, okay, sure. But it was just, Theo Epstein was light years ahead of everybody else, him and Jed Hoyer both. So they came and pitched, and one of the things I remember very vividly about the Boston thing was that I had the Yankees on my phone in the interim saying, hey, listen, if you just don't sign there, let the window run out. And when the window runs out, we'll be there Saturday morning. You can fill in the check. We don't care. And I was like, oh, this is kind of nice leverage to have. But it ended up being, at the end of the day, the choice between Boston and New York came down to this. I could go be a Yankee and be a part of World Championship 27, 28, maybe 29. Or I can go to Boston and do something no one alive has ever seen before. And I negotiated a $2 million World Series bonus into the contract. My fourth year of the deal became guaranteed if we won a World Series before the end of my contract. Because those were the incentive, because they couldn't pay me. They said, we can't pay you more than Pedro. And I was like, okay, whatever. But you're bringing me there to win a World Series. If I help bring the goods, I want to get paid for it. And so I negotiated those things into the deal, and I ended up making every penny of that money. And we won too. And it was everything you thought it could be. Being part of that 04 team was. I'm actually interviewing Bronson Arroyo on my podcast. I did Johnny Damon last week. I've had Papelbon and Mirabelli on. We're still close. And you played on some teams that most of every team you ever played on the big leagues. You go back in the clubhouse and meet these guys, it's like you were there yesterday. There's no breakdown of friendships and bond here. We're friends for life, and we spent more time with these guys than we did with our families. So walking into a room is like walking into a room tomorrow.
Some of the things you were discussing right there, the 01, to me, I was on that 01 Mariner team. We were supposed to win the whole thing.
Oh.
And then all of a sudden 9/11 hits. You mentioned 9/11, and we go to New York and they beat us. And that was like impossible that year because we were on a magic carpet ride. And I remember looking at my teammates when we left there going, that didn't just happen.
Yeah.
And it did. On to you guys in Arizona, and you mentioned you and RJ, Randy. I was teammates with Randy when I was young, coming up, and I remember watching you guys going. Now that's a 1-2 punch right there. And you mentioned I'm going to pitch game 1, game 4, game 7. Schill, to this day, when we get to the playoffs and people are asking me about how they should set up, I said, well, he should be able to go on 3 days rest, and I just assume, oh, he can't do that, and I just go. He's a horse. Right. He has to be able to do that in the postseason. What you and Randy did in that, I remember so much about 01, and so much of it is bittersweet because we got out.
And I got to tell you, honestly, from my perspective, you guys getting knocked out was the best thing that could have ever happened. You guys, that offense was terrifying. Now, I don't know that we were as concerned about your pitching, but if I remember right, 116 win or something obscene.
Right. Yeah, it was obnoxious.
But that was the one team in the American League that I don't think we were afraid of them. But we were way more concerned about the Mariners than the other team. And when you guys got knocked out, it was stunning to me.
And when we got knocked out, then you start thinking like, well, it's New York. It just must be their year with 9/11. Then you guys pull it off, and it was.
Well, they were going for 4 in a row too.
Yeah, unbelievable. I remember the George Bush first pitch.
Oh,
was chills down your spine. Everything about that. Touch on real quick. Brenly that year took over in Arizona. Is there a napkin? Is there a napkin story?
There. You know what? And I say this, and there's no disrespect meant in any of this. But in a nutshell, Bob Melvin, co-managed that team.
Bob, he was my skipper in 03.
He co-managed that team. He was the guy. He was the communicator. That's why I knew he'd be a great big league manager because of what he did. Bob was a top line guy who there wasn't a lot to do on that team because we were a veteran team. We knew how to play the game. There were enough guys in that clubhouse, from Todd Stottlemyre to Matt Williams, Nobody was going to go outside their lane. Everybody was going to do their work and do their job. And so you just needed kind of a daycare kind of consultant. And I think Bob was that. In a great way. I think he had a way about himself, because that was at about the time when the game was changing and it stopped being an X's and O's. The manager stopped having an impact on winning games because he didn't. You stopped. Sabermetrics was starting to kind of creep into the universe, and so you did less during the game because your job as a manager was, I need my 25 guys to not kick each other's ass and to want to play in the same uniform and go out and play hard every night. That's my job as a manager. And this was early on. And Bo Mel was the guy, and you can appreciate this as a position player. I can remember 100 nights where Bo Mel would come in and go, hey, and he would walk around the clubhouse, and it's the National League, right? Before the DH. So you've got your 8 position players, and then you've got 25 or 6 bench guys. In the National League, bench guys were big, huge. So he would go to Craig Counsell, hey, you're playing second tomorrow. To Colburn, he'd say, hey, listen, their middle of their pen is this, this, and this. You could probably, you're not starting tomorrow, but you could see in a bat in the 7th or 8th every single night. And that level of communication as players, you know how much we love that. Mm-hmm. Don't listen. I'll take anything, just like an umpire. I just want consistency. I don't want to show up. And I didn't do this as a pitcher, but I know as position players hated showing up on a Monday all geared up to play and they're not in the lineup and no one said anything to them. Right? Because you spent your whole day a certain way. You're playing. Your off days are different than your game days. Mm-hmm. And for me as a pitcher, my start day was very different than every other day. And so that Bob Brenly was, and I just saw him a couple weeks ago in Arizona. We had a reunion in Arizona the same weekend we had one in Philadelphia for the 25-year anniversary of the team. And I'll always cherish. Nice, great guy, baseball lifer, has a perspective few people have. Was a good player too, by the way. But we had a phenomenal coaching staff too, Booney. I'll never, and I want to tell you quick, I don't have any napkin stories, right? Because I talk way too freaking much for napkin stories. But in an open-ended podcast, I'm your best friend. Anyway, we had a great coaching staff, right? Chris Fire was the infield coach. We had so my pitching coach, okay, Bob Welch, who became one of my favorite human beings of all time.
Outstanding.
But the thing about Welchie was, when we cleared benches, someone was Rubio Durazo, I think, was responsible for finding Welchie and getting him off the field, because Welchie would kill somebody, and you didn't have to provoke him. He would just go out and would start beating on somebody. And so, but I was in love with Bob Welch. He didn't teach me a ton about pitching, but he taught me a ton about being a pitcher. And I never had a problem being a quote unquote number 2 behind RJ and Pedro, because that was like being second in a painting contest to Picasso, right? I mean, on the day I pitch, I'm the one, boys. And if you don't believe it, here it comes. And so, but a great coaching staff. And it was you had Bob Brenly, and it was very different, right? I played for Buck Showalter for only a couple months. I loved Buck. I absolutely loved Buck Showalter. He had a coaching staff of guys that weren't necessarily big league players. A lot of them had never played the big leagues, because that's what he surrounded himself with. Bob Brenly was the opposite. All of his coaches had big league, for the most part, had big league. Dwayne Murphy had big league experience because he had a big league clubhouse. You had Mark Grace, Todd Stottlemyre, Matt Williams, Luis Gonzalez, Counsell. You had a ton of veteran players in that clubhouse who didn't need a babysitter. They needed a guy to alleviate, and you had Arizona media, so there wasn't like you had to worry about the media like you did in Boston and Philadelphia, excuse me. But that was, what a year that was. And so many memories of that year that I'll take to my grave and be cherished, that I ever had a chance to be a part of.
The 04 World Series, still to this day, I've had a lot of guys on the podcast on both sides of the ledger in 04.
Yeah.
But I remember watching it still to this day. It's one of the greatest things I've ever seen in sports. One of my 3 wonders of sports. This is one of them. Being down 3-0 to that Yankee team in that rivalry come back, win 4, and then sweep the World Series. That doesn't happen. When you're
No.
down 3-0, especially they're going 4 straight. No, they weren't going for 4 straight at that time. But it was still that core of guys.
Well, remember
I
that team.
remember,
That was
it's
A-Rod,
unbelievable
Matsui.
that you guys did that.
Yes. Yep.
Take me
Yeah.
through
Well,
04 and tell me how
okay.
unreal that was.
So, right. So if you remember, well, it's hard to remember. It was a long time ago, but we were behind the Yankees most of the midway through the season, and we had a game with the Yankees, and Bronson drilled A-Rod with a breaking ball, and A-Rod. I don't know how position players do this, but I've heard it enough to believe it's true. There are times when a player feels like he needs to either ingratiate himself with his teammates or he needs to get his team fired up. And A-Rod starts talking shit going down the first baseline. And one of the 5 greatest quotes in the history of baseball was, and I don't know if you're bleeping language on this, you're gonna want to bleep this, but he's like, you can see him on his mouth. He's going, "Fuck you" to Bronson, "Fuck you," and Tech jumps out and says, "Shut the fuck up," and he's like, "Fuck you," and he goes throwing shit at me. He goes, "We don't throw at 260 hitters, bitch," and because A-Rod was hitting like 270 at the time. And that's when and A-Rod and Tech picks him. By the way, if you're watching that video, please understand how strong Alex Rodriguez is. Jason Varitek might be the strongest player I ever played with next to Dave Hollins. He tried to pick A-Rod off the ground and couldn't do it. Like A-Rod, that was a legit fight. Like there was Tanyan Sturtz got his face beat by Kapler and Ortiz. And, I was like, I'm very proud of the fact that in almost every single bench clearing brawl in my career, I'm the first guy on the camera outside of the 2 that are fighting on the field because I could read that shit. Like I was at the step of the dugout and I'm waiting and waiting. And before Tech's face, his gloves hit his face, I'm on the field running and I'm rabbit punching A-Rod as I get him. And then Sheffield grabs me and we go at, but that was the last year that we really didn't like each other. And the hatred, Yankee Red Sox hatred, was far more in the stands than it was on the field. But they didn't like Pedro. I didn't like Posada. Nobody liked A-Rod at the time. And I say that generally. It's very different now. But we didn't like each other. And it showed. And there was, if you think about those, I mean, we had the misfortune of being ESPN Sunday Night Baseball every freaking week. It was Yankees Red Sox, which meant a 6-hour game with tape with commercials because both lineups, top to bottom, were full of 350 on base percentage guys and Manny and all these other guys. And we played we went 5-5 in the 10 games after that. And then we dealt Nomar, which was a season-long issue for us. The Nomar situation never went away. And we dealt Nomar, and we got Dave Roberts, Doug Mankiewicz, and the key to the whole thing was Orlando Cabrera, who came in and horribly underrated player, horribly underrated teammate too, by the way. And we eventually took off. If you remember that game, Billy Miller took Mo Rivera deep in extra innings to win it. We walked him off. And about a week later, we took off. And we got to the playoffs. We're down 3-0. And I remember the moment it turned. I'll never forget it. I was in the clubhouse. And in Boston, we had a feed to the media room on the TV. And it was Tito. Tito was sitting in front of the media. And the Boston media was, I always say in Philadelphia and Boston, there's a different dynamic. You have to play the pregame media, the game, and then the postgame media. There's 3 games a day because the pregame media can impact the game and the game can impact the postgame media. And it's a vicious cycle if you let it live. And there are a lot of guys in that were just complete dicks in that room. But somebody asked Tito about what are you going to do? And he looked at him like, what do you mean? What are we going to do? We're going to show up tomorrow and we're going to play as hard as we can play and try to win a game. And everything went away. When I felt like the water level in the room went from full to empty from a pressure perspective, because that's what we were going to do. We didn't have to win 4 games. And I remember we had a team meeting and I said, listen, guys, we don't have to win 4 games. We don't have to win 3 or 2. We don't have to win tomorrow's game. We have to win the top of the first inning. We have to win we have to win every at bat. Even if you make it out, make it a win at bat. Make it a Johnny Damon 10-pitch at bat. Every hitter, every pitch, we have to make matter. And for 8 consecutive games, one of the most talented rosters I was ever on was that focused. And you know as well as I do, when that much talent is focused on a singular point in space, you can't get beat. And the horribly underrated aspect of that entire run was the fact that we swept the Cardinals team that was insanely talented. Pujols and Roland and Renteria and Walker. I mean, it was insanely talented. And we walked in there and we took them 4-0, and it was a clean sweep. And um, we get down. David hits a walk off in Game 4. David hits another walk off in Game 5. Then we get to Game 6 and we win Game 6 in Yankee Stadium. And then we get to Game 7 and they're starting Kevin Brown, and Damon gets thrown out the plate in the first inning. And Red Sox Nation, 86 years, they're like, oh no, here we go again. Sure enough, David comes up to the plate and hits a home run in the first inning. We're up 1-0. Then 2 innings later, Johnny hits a grand slam. And we're winning 8. I'll never forget it either, because it was like 10-4 or 10-2. And our buttholes are all still this tight, thinking, oh my God, how are they going to score 11 runs? Because they're going to score seven or 8 runs. They have to. This is just the way it happens. And Tito brought in Pedro, who, this was when Who's Your Daddy was a big thing in New York, and like breathed life into the stadium. All of a sudden, Yankee Stadium, they're down 7 runs and they're chanting, Who's Your Daddy? And we end up closing it out. And that was our World Series. That really was. No disrespect to the Cardinals, but coming back and beating the Yankees after all that had happened, that was our World Series. And I can tell you honestly, I don't know how involved you were, but I was always involved in the pre-series scouting meetings. I would sit in and listen to the advanced scouts because I always wanted to hear, in the National League, there are always 2 or 3 roster spots that could be fluctuated with a pinch hitter or an extra catcher. And I wanted minor league reports on guys I might see. And I remember the St. Louis one. And again, no disrespect to the Cardinals. At the end of the St. Louis scouting meeting for the World Series, it wasn't whether we could win the World Series or not. We didn't see an avenue for the Cardinals to beat us 1 game because they didn't have swing and miss pitching. And if in October, if you can't make hitters swing and miss, you get crushed. And that lineup, remember that lineup? We had a batting champion hitting 9th. Bill Miller was hitting 9th on that lineup. And top to bottom, it was, we would get you could shut us out for 6 innings and still have 135 pitches. That was the kind of lineup it was. But it wasn't whether the Cardinals could win. And the same thing happened in 07 with the Rockies. After the meeting, we're like, I don't know that it's not that we can't win the World Series. I don't think they can beat us a game because they didn't have the pitching to do it. And like we rolled over them 4-0. Quick story, we won 8 in a row after being down 3-0. And the triggering event happened in the wives' lounge. My wife, so yeah, I know the smirk. So in 01, my wife, when we went to the World Series, she had bandanas made for all the wives, purple bandanas that they wore kind of as their little team bonding thing. And in 04, she did the same thing. And Michelle Damon, who was not Michelle Damon at the time, she was Johnny's girlfriend, and my wife didn't get along. And Michelle Damon walks in after Game 3, and my wife's sitting on the chair, and she throws her bandana down on Shonda's lap. And she's like, a lot of good these fucking bandanas did us. And Shonda stands up and goes, well, maybe if you Warriors, your husband wouldn't be fucking 0 for 20. And it was on. Like, physical altercation in the wives' lounge. And my wife tells me this after the game, and I'm like, oh, my God.
You're killing me.
Yeah, this is not good. We're down 3-0, and now I got to go in, and one of my teammates, and Johnny and I see each other the next day in the clubhouse, and we walk in, and it was like a Charlie Brown moment. We saw each other, and we both just started laughing. We're like, oh, okay, whatever. We got to go out and play a game. And we won 8 straight after that, so she takes credit for the 04 World Series to this day.
That is awesome. Yeah, and you go through the 04 and 07. I just remember being a player that wasn't in that rivalry, I mean, all of us in the big leagues at that time in history, like you said, it seemed like every Sunday night baseball was Red Sox, Yankees. And
when you're not in it as a player, it gets boring. It's like, enough already. Turn the page, guys.
But it was heated. That rivalry now, and you win another World Series in 07. But it was all that back then. Now we're seeing currently it's Baltimore Tampa Bay, they're
Yeah,
atop the division.
yeah,
The Red Sox and the Yankees, it's not Sunday night baseball every week. Now,
right.
I'm not saying, you know, you can't win every single year, but that time in history, uh, it was pretty heated. And do you
I
think it was
my
better that you kind of hated each other?
Yeah, oh yeah, no, no, no. It was
Yeah.
way more entertaining, because there was so much more on the line. Because we were, for the most part, the two best teams in baseball, and so one of us was going to win the division, and one of us was going to be the wild card. And we got to see each other in October, and the stakes were through the roof. And it again, same thing. It was all in the stands, like that energy
Yeah.
the fans brought made it what it was. And Red Sox fans have always hated the Yankees, and Yankee fans have always they've not hated the Red Sox. They've kind of pitied them up until this century, when the Red Sox took over and have done what they've done. But um, I can't imagine my baseball career without that experience. That was something, I don't know, it's Auburn, Alabama football. It's
Oh,
it is one of it's the Cowboys Steelers. It's one of the greatest rivalries in sports, and it's lost a lot of its luster, because neither one of the teams is very good right now. But and I got to tell you, I talk with your brother quite often. I text him, because I think that they're going to make a huge mistake in making him pay for this horrible season, and I think it's going to be the worst thing they could possibly do in that situation. I think your brother's one of the greatest people I've ever known in my life. I think he is the personification of what you want in a major league manager these days. And I would argue that there's probably not a guy in that clubhouse that wouldn't take a bullet for him. And you can't get that buy-in with the modern day athlete like he's gotten. They've underperformed. The players have sucked. They've been hurt, and they just haven't done the things they're supposed to do. None of it falls on him. But somebody pays the price, and you can't fire the team.
yeah, that's true. And it'll be interesting to see. But I laugh and I talk to, I don't be I try to stay out of it a little bit because
Yeah,
here's Big Brother coming in. It's not about that. It's about being a rational, good baseball mind that looks at things
yeah,
honestly. And I've said, and like I said, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I've said recently in a couple interviews that you put this on Aaron Boone, whether you don't know the game, and
right, 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 right.
me and you really can't have a
Well,
conversation
and,
if
and you know,
you're
at the
going to
end of the
put this on
day,
Aaron Boone.
Aaron Boone is a better man than he is a baseball talent, and he's a prodigious baseball talent. I had the honor and privilege of working with him at ESPN, and I cherish those times.
Yeah.
I loved him. I still love him. I think he's one of the God's good people, and I hope he's on the other side of this, because Aaron Boone will manage a world champion at some point.
After '07, you retire. Unbelievable career. I mentioned it. You had led the league in wins a couple years. 9 times you went 200 plus innings. That's big for me. My horse, 346, 216 wins, 6 All-Star games, World Series MVP in 2001. I got a question to you, and this is the Curt Schilling. This is Bret Boone, the player, against Curt Schilling, the pitcher. When did you see? I remember I was with the Reds in the throughout 5 years in the '90s. I faced Curt Schilling, peak Curt Schilling, Philadelphia Phillies. Over the top, power pitcher, hard slider. When you came up with the split, when did you start throwing the split and it was a part of your repertoire? Because I
So,
felt Roger Clemens started doing it, and it was a difference maker to me. It
yeah,
went from really good, tough pitcher, but I can see his fastball. I can
yeah,
see his slider. When you came up with that split, it was a different animal for me, Bret
yeah.
Boone, the hitter.
Well, so it's actually a funny story, and it goes back to my Red Sox days. When I was in Boston as a minor leaguer in the '80s, we didn't have pitching coaches in the minor leagues. We had roving instructors who would come in every now and then. So a lot of my bullpens were thrown unsupervised, and so you either adapted and learned, and you had a baseball IQ, or you just stagnated and they got rid of you. I was I made the Double A team out of spring training from low A ball as kind of the last pitcher on the staff, and it was kind of I was young, and about a month or two into the season, Dave Holt, our manager, came and said, "You're going to start in Williamsport your next game." And I was like, "Okay." So I went. Todd Pratt was my catcher, and I went to Pratty and I said, "Hey, listen, I don't have the mix to be a starter. I need another pitch." So I said, "I'm just going to try a forkball." And it was back when Brian Harvey had this. I
Yes.
watched Brian Harvey, and he had a
Harvey the
filthy
closer.
forkball.
Closer.
Yep. And so I I went to the bullpen. I threw a bullpen and I threw a forkball, and it was filthy. And it's a very different pitch than the split, but I threw it. And so then I go out and I make a start. I throw a complete game and punch out 10, shutout, throwing this nasty forkball. And I'm like, wow, this is okay. This works, man. Well, a month and a half later, I get traded to the Orioles. And they bring me up to the big leagues in September. And I had the forkball. And I messed with it for a couple years. When I went to Houston and became the closer, I moved on to a split-fingered fastball. And it's the easiest pitch in the world to teach. It's the easiest pitch in the world to throw. And it never goes in a slump. A split-fingered fastball is 100% reliant on your arm speed. So when you have velocity, you have a split. And the two pitches I'll never forget seeing in my lifetime as a hitter were a Kevin Brown sinker at 96, which was like a left-handed slider, and Roger Clemens in Game 7 of the 0-1 World Series threw me a 93-mile-an-hour split-fingered fastball, and I laughed. I was late. I was a day late on it, and I looked at Posada and I go, that was a split. He's like, yep, that was a split, bro. But I remember, and that was one of the advantages of National League hitting too as a pitcher. You got to see pitches and understand. Like my first at bat, Booney, in the big leagues, I faced Rob Dibble, and I hit a line drive single up the middle. And then he threw it the next hitter, and we had a bench clearing brawl. But I never had a problem with the fastball. My problem, Charlie Liebrandt made me look like a 5-year-old kid. He threw me 3 changeup. I couldn't handle the change of speeds. And it's where I learned as a hitter, oh my God, change of speeds is like way better than throwing hard. And so the split became my second pitch. And if you think about it, I tell people this, I struck out 3,116 guys. And I would tell you probably half were on splits. I never threw a single split in my entire career trying to throw a strike.
Never.
No. And if you think about what that means is I had to be prepared. I had to face Booney as a hitter, and I had to know what your first pitch swing percentage was, what you did in certain counts. And because you don't get good hitters out with strikes. You get them out of the strike zone. So I had to make you leave the strike zone as a good hitter. Well, the only way to do that was to make you think every pitch I was throwing was a strike. I had such good fastball command, you couldn't sit there and anticipate a ball. And I threw hard enough that you had to be aggressive. The split, when I got it right, looked like a fastball.
Without
until
a
the
doubt.
last 8 or 10 feet because it had rotation. And that just became, I was a 3-pitch pitcher in the sense that I developed a slider to lefties, a backdoor slider, but I was fastball split to most guys. And and Maddox said something early in my career I'll never forget. The key to pitching is to throw a ball when the hitter's swinging and a strike when he's taking. And again, simple, but when you think about the complications of that process, what that means, I have to know when you're swinging and know when you're taking. So that takes preparation and video and all the things. That's what, I still have all my notebooks from when I played, and I had my pregame notes, I had my game plan, and during the game I would write in it when things happened. And so everything to me, and I kept that year after year after year. And by the time I retired, I had a Webster's dictionary size notebook on hitters and umpires. And that to me was what I had to do to be good. And I wanted to be good.
That is, I remember this. This is just a small story for me. I remember, and this hitting coach will go unnamed. I remember him in a meeting, and whoever we were facing that night, might have been Hideo Nomo. He said, guys, when the split starts out as a strike, that you take it. And I remember looking at him going, did you really play in the big leagues that long?
Right.
Don't you think if we knew that, we would take the pitch? Obviously,
Yep.
And that's what people don't understand. And the layman's, when they talk about it, it's like the reason we swing at the split is because we think it's a fastball.
It looks like a fastball.
It's amazing to me.
Well, it's also there are, one of the things I found in my career from coaching perspective, the greatest players tended to not be very good coaches. And Frank Robinson, who to this day I adore, admire, and love, he couldn't understand why you couldn't hit a ground ball to second base with a runner on second. Just hit a ground ball to second base. And it was like, okay, Frank, I understand what you're saying, but it actually isn't that easy. But to Frank Robinson, it was. And so those guys, some of them tended to not be great coaches because they couldn't understand why you just couldn't do things. Well, hit against the shift. Well, okay.
This.
Right. And so those things to me, no, I don't like a lot of the rule changes. I think the shift one's a stupid one. But I always said, listen, if they're shifting and the third baseman's playing shortstop, if you bunt 4 times, they'll stop shifting. Players wouldn't do it because bunting doesn't get you on ESPN. And guys wanted to be highlights instead of winning games. And that was not a good thing.
This year's you keeping close tabs this year?
So I have a podcast called the Curt Schilling Baseball Show. I do it Tuesdays and Fridays. Actually, today my interview with Rod Carew is playing in full. Yeah, yeah.
Very cool.
And so yes, I pay attention. It's hard to watch anymore because the next time I see a starting pitcher tipping his cap as he walks off the mound in the middle of the 6th inning, I'm going to have acid reflux. It's a different game. And again, you don't really blame the players because the money's gotten so big that teams are investing so much but these guys are learning on the job, and you can't do that. I don't think you can ask a pitcher to learn and do things for the first time in the big leagues. I had 600 innings in the minor leagues before I came to the big leagues, not because I wasn't good enough, but because that's what you did. I had probably 30 complete games in the minor leagues. I knew what pitching in the 8th inning of a game with the tying run on second base and the number 3 hitter up, I knew what that was like. I didn't have to do it in the big leagues for the first time. And so you see a lot of guys coming up and they get off my lawn, old guys, and we do, guys don't understand fundamental baseball. They don't. I can't. Last year watching the playoffs, I got sick to my stomach because 9 of every 10 pitchers were throwers. They were throwing the ball as hard as they could throw it. And I just, I'll watch the catcher set up and see him do this and do this and do this and realize that there's no pitching going on. They're just throwing as hard as they can. And that's what bullpens are made up of now. They're made up of 5 or 6 velocity guys. And you don't have your Mariano Rivera anymore, the guy who has precise command. That guy, obviously, there's very few Marianos. But when you watch a guy like Jacob deGrom or Verlander or Scherzer pitch or Kershaw, it's different. They're commanding their fast. And there's 2 things: command and control. Everybody in the big leagues has control, the ability to throw strikes. Command is the ability to manipulate the ball inside the strike zone. And I could do that in my mind. Like in the first inning, great example. So when I pitched in the first inning, I never showed all 3 of my pitches. And I would throw fast. And there were games where I would tell myself, and I did it, I'm not going to throw a breaking ball till they have a base runner. Because I knew I threw 96. My fastball was 6 pitches, not 1. You can't hit the fastball in at the hands the same way you do the fastball down and away. In fact, you can't provide for both. You have to pick one. And my job was knowing which one you didn't pick. And now it's, wow, that you see them, they throw it, they look at the gun. They throw it, they look at the gun. Well, I looked at the gun every now and then because I was always, everyone wants to know how fast their car's going. But it was about, and Johnny Padres, I always said, how hard am I throwing? He's like, he would grab me by the shirt and say, the hitters will let you know how hard you're throwing. And it's true. The Jamie Moyers of the world are lost.
Yeah, I didn't like facing guys like you that you're going to think with me. I don't want to talk to Jamie Moyer. I don't want to. Pedro was tough because he's reading my body language. He knew when I took a pitch a certain way that I was looking for something else.
I always tried to learn from my guys that I pitched with. Pedro Martinez was one of the highest baseball IQs of anybody. Pedro reacted visually. Where you were in the box, how you took a pitch, how you fouled the ball off. I couldn't do that. I don't ever remember even seeing the hitter at the plate. I reacted to my pitches, and my pitches went off of my pitches as opposed to your reaction. And Pedro was a guy who could see you move up in the box. Hal Morris was a great one, right? Yeah. Hal would stand at the back of the batter's box, back corner, and when I'm winding up, I didn't know this for a while. He owned me in the minor leagues. He would creep up to the plate when you were winding up. And that fastball away where he's 15 miles from the outside corner, he's all over it when you're delivering it because he's now on the plate. And little things like that, you learn. Again, you learn them in the minor leagues. And so those were the things that I took and learned with. And to the day I retired, I was still trying to learn.
You mentioned the Veritek stories. He used to give me nightmares because I'd hit off catchers. And most catchers aren't thinking with me, but I'd have a Jason Veritek. I'll give you an example. You can't hit when I had a plus, when I'm facing a number 1, number 2 guy, and they've got 2+ pitches. You made a good reference. You can't hit them both. I can touch them both, but I can't hurt you on both. I
Right.
got to get on one and trust
And
my
it's
instinct.
generally going to be the fastball in your spot until you have 2 strikes.
Right. Jason Varitek was a nightmare for me because I'd come up with the bases loaded and pick a pitcher on the mound. I'm sitting soft because I don't think to Bret Boone in a base loaded situation, this guy controls his pitches. He's going to throw me a first pitch fastball. Well, if Jason Varitek threw me a first pitch fastball with the bases loaded and I took it, he'd almost look
Yeah.
up at me, raise his
Yeah.
mask, and go, "Hey, Booney, I guess we weren't looking for a fastball." Oh
Right.
no. Here
Yep.
goes
He
the
can.
cat and mouse. Here
Yep.
goes the game inside the game.
Well, there's a reason why. I think he caught 5 or 6 no-hitters, more than anybody ever, and he caught like 7 or 8 one-hitters. I lost a no-hitter in the bottom of the 9th with 2 outs because I shook him off one time the entire game, and it was the pitch I shook him off of. Shannon Stewart lined it to right field, and if I had thrown the pitch he wanted, he would have grounded the ball back to me, and I would have had a no-hitter. But he was the only guy I ever saw put in as much time as I did in the preparation thing. And we lockered next to each other in Boston, and I always early in my career I had veteran Bob Melvin, Mickey Tettleton, I had Darren Dalton, but my young catchers, I usually only had one catcher during the season, and it wasn't because I had a guy. It was because I wanted consistency, because tempo was part of my game. I want to get the ball and I want to pitch. And I don't want to be shaking off 4 or 5 signs. 99 times out of 100, my shakeoffs, I was shaking off nothing. I was just shaking off so you, the hitter, would see me shaking, because I only had 2.5 pitches, so I'm really not shaking the knuckleball. So what I told my young catchers, I said, listen, if I shake you off and you feel conviction about something, tap your chest and say, I want this. And very few catchers did that, because that put them on the seat. That put them in the accountable place. But the good ones like Todd Pratt, Doug Mirabelli, Tech did it too. Levy did it. Mike Lieberthal, Gary Bennett did it. But guys who, same thing. I had my catchers buy in, man. When I had young catchers, I told Levy early in his career, I said, listen, dude, I don't care if you go 0 for 4 and punch out 4 times. If I see you on the bench, like working on your hands or trying to play with your swing, I'm going to have a problem. You need to be behind the plate, manage my umpire, and manage my game. Get your 4 hits tomorrow if it doesn't happen today, but I want you in my game.
Well, Curt Schilling, I appreciate you coming on the program. And once again, to the people out there listening to the Boone podcast, Tuesdays, Thursdays, where can they find your podcast?
Go to outkick.com, Curt Schilling Baseball Show, Apple, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcast. Rod Carew interview today. I did Johnny Damon last week. Got Bronson Arroyo coming on this week. And my first podcast ever, I predicted the Orioles to win the AL East this year. So I'm standing on that one, and my future's bet. So
who's the World Series champion this year?
I'm gonna go with the Orioles because I bet them. But if I was gonna put money on it today, I would have to. I don't see how you beat the Braves in a 7-game series. I really don't.
Only team I see in either league without a weakness. Curt Schilling, awesome, man. I appreciate
Looney,
it.
appreciate
the grandpa. I appreciate the grandpa stories.
Yes.
I always love that. Go ahead.
Tell your father I said hello, and your brother as well.
You got it. And
take care, buddy.
For all you listening, watching the Boone podcast, I appreciate you showing up, and we'll see you next time.